So, Greg, let's start with a cliche. Oh, hi, Greg, of course. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about The Room, but so I'm going to ask one thing that is completely different of it. What is for you the greatest movie of all time?
Can I say like more modern and more...
As you wish.
I think Sunset Boulevard is one of the more older films, yes. And I would say Back to the Future and more newer films.
Okay. It's curious you talk about Sunset Boulevard because it's consistently quoted in the book. And as you see, I have here a copy of the book which was raped very many times because of its state.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very curious to have all of those quotes from Sunset Boulevard and from the talented Mr. Ripley. And talking about the one from Sunset Boulevard that opens the book, when Joe Gillis says that in the dialogue between Norma Desmond and Joe Gillis, they talk about the heart and doing things with the heart, yeah. Even if they are bad or not. And do you think that is the heart that makes the difference between The Room and the other bad movies of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it separates The Room. Was just how passionate Tommy was about making it a grand drama. I think he really shot for the stars, and I think much more so than a lot of the other bad films.
Yes, and so it's because of that Room became a timeless classic.
Exactly, yeah.
And from the talented Mr. Ripley quote that opens also the book, do you think that Tommy Wiseau really enjoys to be a fake somebody in these days? The quote is, it's better to be a fake somebody than a real nobody.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tommy's intentions with The Room was to make Streetcar Named Desire, something yes. that would end up at the Academy Awards, which I think everybody who sits down and tries to do something creative, they dream about it being at the top of whatever. And so Tommy's film got a huge response, but it wasn't in the way he intended. And he decided if people are going to roll with it that way, then sure, it's a comedy, let it be a comedy. So he decided that he was going to stick to himself believing that the film is a great film. But if people want to show up and laugh and throw stuff at the screen, then they're doing it for the right reasons, in his mind.
But do you think that every night at home, Tommy goes to the mirror crying and saying, "No, I'm a dramatic genius, nobody understands me"?
No, I think at this point he has worked it out, okay. And has seen that it's 14 years and people are still showing up. He did something right, and whatever that is, let it be.
How can you? I think it's amazing, both in the book and many interviews I saw of you, that you told here in the book many terrible things that Tommy made with you or with the other members of the crew, and at the same time you understood that it was an incredible experience. How can you live with those mixed feelings about everything? I think it's quite fascinating.
It is. It's a very mixed experience because there's like Jekyll and Hyde in a way. There's a part of Tommy that I relate to that I think is a beautiful side, entertaining, engaging, heartfelt, and then there's a side to Tommy that's misunderstood that 20 years later I still don't understand. And the only way to have this story come to life and the way I've observed it and the way I've spent time around a character like Tommy is to tell the good and the bad, because it showcases like the struggle like anybody would want to leave. There's been a lot of people in his life that have not understood the other part of him and that have left when the darkness sort of comes out. And because I was introduced to the beautiful part of him initially, it gave him more leeway. And I think a lot of people didn't see the other part, and therefore they only see Tommy a certain way. A little bit like that poster. And so that was really the matter, because, you know, we have all different types of friends. I think we have friends that are just kind of like your comfort buddies that
Yes.
you would never even think of a way to tell a story about them, just because that's not the dynamic. But this was a friendship that had two sides, and was not traditional in any way, and therefore this film, you know, changed my life in a lot of ways. It changed his life in a lot of ways for different reasons.
Yes.
And I think it was therapeutic in a lot of ways to talk about these things that happened that I had, you know, I'd gone through them at a very young age, and I think you're willing to do stuff when you're young that you're not willing to do later. And it was very therapeutic in a way to get these stories out and kind of help anybody who's seen The Room or anybody that knows about this to understand how I got there in the first place and why I stayed, and
Yes.
why the story, while The Room might be considered a bad film, why the whole story behind it I think is universal and inspiring.
Yes, in a certain way, yes. Do you think that if you and Tommy wouldn't, if you didn't go to the cinema to rewatch and he to watch for the first time The Talented Mr. Ripley, do you think that The Room would ever be made?
There's a lot of things that needed to happen for The Room to be made.
Because in the book, the idea that came to my mind was that the movie was the thing that came to I don't want to say that was the only thing, but was after many ideas was the thing that
there's a lot of things
exploded in the head of Tommy.
There's a lot of things, and I think that was definitely one of them.
Okay. And if you, this is like a more, not personal question, it's like a personal question. Do you think that if you in the book talk about your early stages in modeling and in some films, do you think that if The Room would never be made, you had the opportunity to have a big career in Hollywood, or?
No, I think
you are bad, then you would think you would have the opportunity.
I just think the odds are very much stacked against you, and I had a good agent. I'd gone out for things. I'd done a few things. It's just
the odds weren't in your favor.
We don't know. I doubt it. I'd seen everybody I'd kind of been with when I'd started with that agent.
Yes.
Never. They did some big things, and here we are 15 years later, and they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
So I think it's very rare to get something that people see and talk about for this long. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Could I have been in another few Miramax movies? Sure. Would they still be around now?
No.
Probably not. So it just depends how you define a big career. I think. I mean,
or
like the guys that are like in Felicity during that time, like, you know, 15 years later, where are those guys are working? Are they still somebody that people talk about all the time, or they're still at the forefront of like cinema or cult cinema? It's just really tough, and I think The Room gave me a angle that really fit me, because storytelling was my first passion. Then it allowed me to really dive in and have creative control over something and do a book that I think was something that was much more suited to me, which has now become something different, important in a different way. And so therefore it's not just relying on your phone ringing to be an actor in this or that, and
that kind of life difficult fight for survival, right?
Yeah, and now it's a little bit more like you have a little bit more ownership over what you're trying to do.
Okay. How come the idea for the book? I mean, was Tom Bissell that contacted you?
I actually contacted Tom Bissell after I had read one of his articles, because I felt like I wanted to tell a story that was rich and interesting about something that was considered terrible, and I wanted to work with someone who was really a high-end writer who wrote about things in a more sophisticated way than more of a pop culture way. And so I had the idea of the book to write something in the vein of Ed Wood or Sunset Boulevard, a Hollywood story that we hadn't seen before, that the ending was more inspiring despite its darkness than tragic.
Yes.
I think Ed Wood Sunset Boulevard a little bit more of a tragic ending, where the figures don't get to see the light at the end. And I think this story, even though the film was considered a failure, it still breeded a success.
It still resonates.
And I thought that was what the story I wanted to tell. And when I spoke with Tom about it, he saw it the same way and believed in it. And so therefore we teamed up to try to tell it.
You were talking about the room, about Ed Wood, and I'm constantly hearing people saying, "Oh, Tommy Wiseau is the new Ed Wood." I don't think it's quite right.
I don't think it's right. I think they're two very different artists. I would think that what I respected about Ed Wood was that Ed Wood, despite not having any money, made films. And he made them in any way he could.
Yes, and many films.
He would replace actors if he had to. He would fill in. He would write. So I have a lot of respect for Ed Wood in the sense that he didn't take no for an answer, and he produced a lot of material despite having no money.
Yes.
Tommy is a more dynamic character because he has money and still made something that still made the room, you know, and then he got to achieve success in a way that Ed Wood never did, but then Tommy never turned around and made anything else.
Yes.
So I think if you could combine Tommy and Ed Wood, you could have a force of nature that we haven't seen. So I appreciate both of them differently. I do think what both stories have are campiness.
Yes.
You know, despite Ed Wood being more of a normal man and having a wife, he still liked to dress up in women's clothing.
Yes.
Tommy is a vampiric figure that would have fit into Ed Wood's world. So they both are moving stories about oddball friendships, and I think that's where the comparisons are to me. And the way that Ed Wood's story made me feel, at least the film, I was moved in a way that was different, and I thought that's what this story could kind of fit into.
And also, I love a lot the movie that Tim Burton made about Ed Wood, and I think after all the terrible things that the movie shows, it's quite beautiful, the kind of respect about the struggle of that man to show his vision to the world.
Exactly.
It's something that is very present in the Disaster Artist. I didn't watch the film yet, but the adaptation, but I think it has the same thing, right?
And I love Bela Lugosi. I saw it kind of a parallel of Ed Wood and Bela Lugosi, a similar connection.
Yeah. Like a cliche question, what was the best screening of The Room you ever saw?
I think it was at the Ziegfeld Theater in New York.
You have answered this question a lot of times, right? There were
1,200 people. It was one of the first films to sell out the Ziegfeld, I think, since the re-release of Star Wars.
It was in 2010.
Just watching 1,200 people like shout at the screen together was pretty incredible.
That makes all terrible things in the book were worth it because of that experience. How many girls did you fool in your life by saying, "Oh, I've been in one famous movie in my life"?
I can honestly say this: I've never used The Room to meet a girl. In fact, if they ask me what I do, I do not say acting or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I can proudly say that.
Okay. If you think, the Disaster Artist, if you in 2017 were writing the Disaster Artist, was there anything that you would add now to the book? Any new information? Anything that was a part?
I think the story very much is a great beginning to end chapter.
Yes.
In my life, and I feel like it's a great story the way it fits. I mean, obviously, if for some reason this movie ends up going to the Academy Awards or something, then you have a whole new story. I feel like I like to tell stories in a complete way and not kind of just throw a quick epilogue out there. I'd rather tell the entire journey since the room ended.
Yes, and you want to, in the future, to have more experiences in storytelling like this?
Yeah, I ended up writing a new film.
Okay.
That stars Tommy and I.
Oh,
it's
okay,
it's called Best Friends, and we finished it. And we've been doing test screenings of it, and I think people are really surprised by it because it's a role that really suits Tommy. And it's like an LA noir type story that's totally different from The Room. And it's really bizarre. But it's something that it was a process of telling a story on the page and then bringing it to life on the screen, and it was very rewarding. So I'd like to continue to do that.
To do more movies, like maybe directing something in the future?
I think writing and producing is much more
what you want to do.
My thing, yeah. I think directing is a major job that I think not everybody can do, and I don't want to.
Tommy Wiseau fits the job.
Yeah, I don't think stick to what you feel content and comfortable doing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm very curious to watch Best Friends. I think it's because.
Are you coming tonight?
Yes.
Oh, we're going to show a trailer that hasn't been released yet.
Really?
So I'll be interested to see what you think about it.
That's nice. Because when I watched the trailer that was released on YouTube and everything, I thought it was very curious because Tommy is quite different, right? I don't know. I mean, many years have passed since The Room, but he in his acting is really, really different. Don't you?
You know what? I will say this. I mean, can't believe I'm saying it, but I believe that he's very good. He's really improved in the movie, and I think it's a combination of.
He had 14 years to face.
It's a combination of fitting the role,
yes,
and just working with people that are being sincere towards him, not trying to make him act as Tommy, treating him as an actor. So.
Okay. How many times he had to watch A Streetcar Named Desire again to learn how to act?
I think he watched it every day.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
But since today he didn't read the play, because in the book that there's a very funny scene about him impersonating Marlon Brando more than the character of the book. And the idea that came out for me, that was the only classic movie that he knew, and his whole world was made upon that movie.
Yeah. And Rebel Without a Cause, I think.
Yeah. Yes, and James Dean, right? And James Dean. Oh, there's that photo in him with the grave of James Dean. After all these years. What are the best reactions you remember to what you called the most swiftly forgiven attempted murder in the history of film? That scene with Peter in the rooftop. I think it's it's hilarious because
I think disbelief.
Your character is like bipolar in that moment.
The audience is just like, what? Like you try to kill somebody and it's like,
okay,
sorry. You know what? A lot of times when we made it, when I watched the scene, I didn't really see the comedy as much until I saw it with an audience, and it made me realize how ridiculous it is. And that's the beauty of The Room. When you watch it with an audience, you see the whole thing come to life in a different way.
Yeah. That's. But you remember any specific reaction that was not so normal in that scene? Because I watched it many times. With many people, and everybody reacts in a very different way. Many people laugh hysterically, and others just keep, oh my god, what's happening?
I think for the most part it's just shocked laughter. Yeah, definitely.
What Tennessee Williams character you think is similar with Tommy Wiseau? Okay.
I'll give Tom. I'll throw
that
Tommy
was not
a bone.
A cliche question.
I'll throw Tommy a bone and say Stanley Kowalski because.
Yeah.
Stanley Kowalski is lovable but totally unhinged.
Yes, and unpredictable in many times. Talking about Best Friends, what was the first inspiration for that story? What was the thing that made you write?
Tommy and I took a road trip back in 2003. It was a very chaotic time in our friendship. And
it was after the release of the...
Yeah, after The Room, and something happened on that road trip where I felt like I started playing in my mind about what he was thinking and what if that really occurred, and so the story was taken from real life experience.
And Tommy liked the movie?
He
90% real?
I would say he likes it 85%.
Yeah. It is more of percentage in liking things.
Yeah,
right?
I think there's things he likes about it, and there's other things he sees differently. But like I said, he's terrific.
Why did you think that for the book he said it was 50% real and the movie was 99%?
I think because he doesn't like the chapters about the making of the film, because he believes that he sees it a different way.
Okay.
And so he likes the friendship aspect, which is half the book about, and he doesn't like the rest of it. So.
And mostly also the story about his origins, right?
I think so. I interviewed him for that, so a lot of that stuff I think he would stand by. But I think it's the making of the room that he doesn't see it that way. So
he thinks it was the greatest experience of all time.
I think he has his own opinion.
Okay, for me it's all. Greg, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely.
And I just want to say that you know that the room changes the life of many people, and it's going to continue in that direction, because it has so many things, new things to discover at any rewatching of it. And thank you very much.
Thank you.